Welcome to the Steelers Breakdown Podcast. He is the PennLive Steelers beat reporter Nick Farabaugh, and I'm John Luciew. Now, we're kind of in the same place we've been in a while, so we're not going to talk quarterback the whole episode. Nick has already sort of warned me off that. But on a personal note, I did have a question for Nick to start off the show. I'm coming off of a very relaxing Key West vacation in which I unplugged from everything, all the Steelers stuff and pretty much everything else. But as a beat reporter, Nick, do you ever get that luxury? I mean, you're consuming this 24/7 on a minute-to-minute basis. Do you ever get to unplug and just not even deal with anything Steelers for a while?
No, I do. It happens. You can kind of predict the rhythms of it. They don't really do anything from May to July generally until training camp. So you can usually unplug during those few months. Even during these kind of times, you can kind of feel out when something's going to come, whether you're going to get a text from someone or you check up. Sometimes I check up just to make sure I can do it. I'll be like, am I good to do this? Sometimes I will. So I do get time to unplug. Now, I don't necessarily get to go on trips to Key West and do it, but I do get some time to unplug. I've usually done that around this time, kind of just, going for walks, hanging out with some friends, doing some basic stuff, nothing too crazy, but I have been able to unwind. It's not been all just, at my computer screen waiting for them to make a move, especially the last week. Once you get past like the first 2 weeks of free agency, things calm down. They might make a move here or there, but it's not as insane.
No, it's good because I definitely think it did me a world of good to just, block out all of the waiting game and the Rodgers stuff and, just get away from it for a while. That being said, I was sort of catching back up on all your stories that you put out and then, all the Yinzers on Twitter. And I thought this was an interesting wrinkle that even though it's quarterback related, that we should address it just in terms of some of the rumors running around there. Okay, so the latest Yinzer conspiracy theory regarding Rodgers is that, and this was articulated by a Pittsburgh radio guy, Andrew Filipponi, but there's different versions of it out there. So here is the theory. Aaron Rodgers already has a handshake deal with the Steelers, but he's going to formally announce it on April 9th at Pat McAfee's sold-out show at PPG Paints Arena. In other words, Rodgers is going to be a surprise guest for McAfee in Pittsburgh, and he's going to make the announcement at this live show, which I guess McAfee's charging admission for, and it's sold out, and it's going to be this latest sort of Rodgers doing his own thing and sort of upstaging the Steelers in this. How do you feel about that scenario?
I mean, it could happen. It would fit the theme, but I can't say for sure it's going to happen. I'm not sure that they have a handshake deal done. I think he's still deciding. Like, I think it's very possible he could do what he did last week with the Steelers and head to the Giants at some point this week. I think that makes a lot of sense for him to do. Because I think, when ultimately Aaron Rodgers is going to make his decision, it's not going to be about the money. I think the Giants are offering more than the Steelers, but I think, he's 41. He'll turn 42 this season. He wants to play. I think that's becoming clear. Otherwise, why do you take the visit to the Steelers? So I think retirement's kind of going down the list. I think it's going to be the Steelers or the Giants. And so we'll see where that goes. But I think he's going to want to feel out the coaching staff. He's going to want to feel out the roster. I know he's been asking questions to some players already on the team, just about kind of how things are like here, day to day, Arthur Smith, et cetera, et cetera. I'll tell you what, I wrote this article yesterday, and I said, I think there's a little bit, if you want to talk about timeline and want to say where maybe that goes. Now, first of all, Tom Pelissero of NFL Network did say yesterday that he thinks it could come soon. So in the next few days, that could happen. I haven't heard anything about that. Aaron Rodgers' circle is Aaron Rodgers, so good luck actually figuring that out. You're kind of just guessing on what people inside these buildings think, but even they are not sure when they're coming. But here's kind of my kind of eyeball guess. So the NFL draft is a little bit under a month away. Yesterday was actually a month to the day of the NFL draft. Also, March 21st was a month to the day the Steelers start their kind of voluntary workouts. So that's April 1st, they start their voluntary workouts. That to me is a soft deadline. April 21st.
Okay.
Why do you say? Because Rodgers last time he did this, you remember when Green Bay was kind of shopping him around and everyone thought it was going to happen in free agency, but there were multiple teams involved and he was kind of mulling offers, and then he went to the Jets, right? Everyone expected the Jets, but that's what ended up happening. But it didn't happen to the week of the draft. It happened the day they started voluntary workouts that year, which is interesting. Because Rodgers, even though people say last year, Rodgers didn't show up to any of the OTAs, the mandatory minicamp, etc., he got excused from that. He's probably not going to do that this year because the first year he was with the Jets, he was at all the voluntary things because he has these kind of complex hand signals he uses. It's kind of an old school quarterback thing where it's not just a simple hand signal. There's a pretty complex scheme of hand signals that are uniquely Aaron Rodgers's. There's that one. 2, he has to build chemistry with DK Metcalf, George Pickens, Pat Freiermuth, whoever you want to throw in there. 3, he's got a unique cadence that I don't think any other quarterback in the NFL has. So you're going to have to get used to that. Even a guy like Russell Wilson, who is a veteran, has similar cadences to other quarterbacks. Rodgers doesn't. He's kind of a little off the beaten path with his hand signals, with his cadence, with how he kind of commands a huddle. And so when you are looking at a guy like Aaron Rodgers, you can't really just sign that guy 2 weeks before the season and expect everything to go smooth, right? He's got to be there throughout the process, and you got to get a feel for Aaron Rodgers. And so Rodgers knows this. He's not stupid. So he's going to know this, and that's why I think April 21st represents somewhat of a soft deadline for when Rodgers will make his decision. I think he's going to take some time. I also think he would want, specifically if he's considering the Giants, I think if you were him, you would want some assurance there's not going to be a rookie breathing down your back. I think we will get clarity on that closer to the draft, so maybe he's kind of gauging that as well. Listen, I think that April 21st date seems to be a good common sense date for everyone involved, just because Rodgers is going to install his own concepts too. You got to understand, like the Steelers' offense under Arthur Smith is going to be probably closer to what it was truly with his days in Tennessee and Atlanta with Rodgers than it was with Russell Wilson. But he's going to install a bunch of his own stuff that he likes in the route concepts, the route tree. It's all going to change. And so all these things take time to install as an offensive coordinator, as a quarterback, with your receivers, et cetera, et cetera. And so that makes a lot of sense to me. April 1st would be the day that you would kind of set as a soft deadline. Now, it's possible it could go longer than that. But I think that's a good kind of, if you want to gather your bearings and say, when could this happen? I think that's probably a good date to kind of throw around in your head.
No, that's going to note that and jot that down. If it doesn't happen at the McAfee event, in Pittsburgh, which would be kind of crazy for that, for Rodgers and McAfee to upstage the Steelers and making the announcement, but we'll see. The one question, as a beat reporter and, your fellow colleagues covering the Steelers, you've got to be secretly rooting that Rodgers comes to the Steelers because it kind of makes your job, more crazy, and the reader interest in this is going to be sky high. Am I reading the tea leaves wrong there? I mean, is there a rooting interest, just in terms of it's a better story if Rodgers comes to the Steelers rather than Mason Rudolph, who's not a bad guy and, might do better than Rodgers, but kind of a ho-hum guy, whereas Rodgers is a lightning rod.
I mean, listen, for readership, it's obviously going to be a thing. People gravitate towards Aaron Rodgers the same way they gravitated towards Russell Wilson. They are big name quarterbacks. Quarterbacks are stars. Stars get used. It's really that simple. So I don't know if I'm rooting for it. I don't think you can. I think if you're doing it right as a journalist, you just kind of go with how it is. You roll with the punches. And so that's kind of how I'm viewing this. I'm not rooting for them to sign Aaron Rodgers. I'm not rooting for them to, not sign Aaron Rodgers and kind of go full ahead and just run with Mason Rudolph. I'm not rooting for them to sign some off-the-wall player or, draft Shador Sanders or draft Jackson Dart. I'm not rooting for any of that. I'm just kind of here. And I think that's the way to do it is you kind of be in your own bubble with it. And the thing is, when you are covering a team like the Steelers, they are such a prestigious franchise. They are one of the kind of most, they have a legacy. right? They have a legacy in this league. They are not just any other team. It's not like covering the Jacksonville Jaguars. It's a little different, right? It's an organization that has readership all around the world, all around the country. And so this kind of, rooting for them to sign Rodgers or whatever, it's not really for me. I'm kind of just there. I'm just there, seeing whatever happens, and then I'll give my thoughts on it.
Hmm.
I will say, if Rodgers does come to Pittsburgh, there is not going to be any shortage of interesting stories.
Hmm.
But this team's already setting up to be that way. And then the Steelers. I mean, not only, even if Rodgers doesn't come, right? They have just stars anyways. They have guys like Cam Hayward, TJ Watt. Mike Tomlin himself is a force in the football world. He is revered as a god in the NFL world. So all of these different things kind of come together. So I'm not rooting for anything to happen. I try to keep my bias out as much as I can. So we'll see what happens. Either way, I'll be there.
And we will be there looking at your coverage on PennLive, of course. You mentioned Russell Wilson and the star power that he brought to the Steelers, and maybe some baggage as well. And you recently had a story kind of exposing the troubled ending with Wilson, and why kind of almost the door has kind of hit him on the butt on the way out of Pittsburgh. They from all intents and purposes, from the way I was reading your article about how things ended, that door is closed to Russell Wilson in Pittsburgh. He is not coming back, and you elaborated on some of the reasons why. Why don't you kind of fill everybody in on that, and why that happened, and should we have seen that coming?
What'd you say? Your audio cut out for me.
Oh, well, and should we have seen it coming? Kind of fill everybody in
No,
on
I
it.
didn't hear the name. Was it Rogers?
Oh, Russell Wilson.
Oh, Russ.
Russell
Okay.
Wilson. Yeah, the kind of the bad ending there. Yeah, and in your recent article on that.
Yeah, I mean, well, Russ, as we had talked about kind of when Justin Fields and Sam Darnold went elsewhere, everyone thought if that happened, the obvious idea would be pivot to Russ, right? He would be option C at worst. Well, it became quite clear that this was never a plan to bring him back. Listen, there are people on the coaching staff that I think don't want to work with him. Arthur Smith is high on that list. I think while Mike Tomlin doesn't necessarily hold disdain towards Russell Wilson, it's not like it was last year, right? Where Mike Tomlin kind of revered Russell Wilson and said, man, how great is it to have this guy who was a Super Bowl champion? He was everything here. Now I think it's more like, he's not going to push the table, right, for Russell Wilson. He's not going to stand on the table and say, we need that guy. Meanwhile, I think it's the opposite. I think he is doing that for Aaron Rodgers. Most Mike Tomlin thing you've ever heard of, right? He loves stars. He loves guys with pedigree, hence Darius Slay, DK Metcalf, et cetera, et cetera. But when you look at Russell Wilson, what happened here was a few things. One, the sour taste, I think, that left at the end of the season to go on that losing streak. He obviously wasn't the issue. He
Mhm.
wasn't the only issue. He was a issue, though. And anytime that happens at the quarterback position, that strains things. Things got a little harder. I think when we talked about this in late January, Jerry Dulac's report, that he got the freedom from the line of scrimmage taken away from him. I think that definitely shook some people in the building. I remember hearing right after that happened, there were coaches that were certainly ticked off at that. I think it didn't sit well with some players, so I think there would be work even in the locker room. So I think, there are things there with Russell Wilson that he was intended not to come back. Like there were a few select players, and I said this before on the show. There were a few select players that were told in their exit meetings that he was not coming back. Like literally, they were told that. I know it sounds crazy and outlandish, and you decide if that is a responsible thing to do as a franchise, but that is what happened. They were not bringing Russell Wilson back. I suppose you can't rule it out at this point because this has gotten to a depth that I don't think anyone saw coming. Right, 2 weeks into free agency, and the Steelers technically don't have a starter because Mason Rudolph was clearly signed to be intended as a backup quarterback rather than a starter. I don't think anyone saw that coming. So I guess a reconciliation of sorts could come, but I'm not so sure that's going to be a thing that comes. Even if Rodgers goes elsewhere, I could see him signing another veteran, Joe Flacco or Carson Wentz. Again, names that aren't going to really shake your boat or anything. The options are pretty putrid right now, quarterback, but I think they're going to. I don't think it's a guarantee Russell Wilson will come back either way. So we'll kind of look at it. But Russell Wilson certainly does not seem like he's coming back to the Pittsburgh Steelers. And then today, in the Asked and Answered on the Steelers.com site, this is the Steelers' curated site.
Mm-hmm.
Bob Labriola says that the relationship is fractured. I mean, if that doesn't say it, things don't just go out on the Steelers' website. They curate that. They kind of look at things that go out, and they're like, if we don't want that out, we're not going to do it. If that's not factual, we're not going to do it. The fact that that was put in print on the official website tells you something. And so I don't think Russell Wilson's coming back. And so I think it's Aaron Rodgers or another veteran, and I think you're going to have a mid-round rookie in there as well. But right now, don't really see Russell Wilson coming back.
No, and that was definitely the tone I got from your article. And one other interesting point that you made in that article is that now one of the likely scenarios for Russell Wilson is the Brownies, where he'd be reuniting with ex-Steelers starter Kenny Pickett. Does that present a scenario for Wilson in Cleveland?
Yeah, I think Cleveland is probably his best spot right now. I mean, listen, I look at a team like the Giants, and he is going to have a rookie breathing down his neck. I really believe that. I think the Giants are going to take a rookie, whether it is going to be Shedeur Sanders or whether it is going to be Cam Ward. We will see. But I think they're going to take one of those two if they're there. And if they're not there, they're going to circle back around, and I imagine look at someone like Tyler Shuck, Jalen Milroe, Jackson Dart, someone like that. And so the Browns also, I think, could take a quarterback, right? Now, so let's see. I think if I'm Russell Wilson at this point, it is March 25th. I'm waiting on Aaron Rodgers to make his decision because I don't know if I can go to the Giants. Maybe if he goes elsewhere, maybe the Steelers at that point would reconsider. I know Russell Wilson is his ideal world. Russell Wilson will be back signing with the Steelers for another year. That's what Russ wants. So maybe maybe that can happen with some desperation to come about, but I don't expect it to. So when Russ looks at this, he says, my two teams that are offering me right now, that he has outstanding offers and interest from, are the Giants and the Browns. And both those teams pick in the top three. And both those teams are threats to take rookie quarterbacks. And so whichever one doesn't is probably where Russ can land. And so if I'm Russ, I would be waiting until after the draft to sign, because whichever team doesn't take a quarterback, if it's the Browns, they're probably going to want a veteran bridge because Deshaun Watson's probably going to be out for most, if not all, of this year. And so you're going to want Russell Wilson probably in there. You feel like maybe he can compete. That interest is very real. The Russell Wilson interest is real. And then if you're the Giants, that's two guys, and Brian Dable and Joe Schoen, the general manager and the head coach of the New York Giants. They are on the hot seat. They don't win this year, they're gone. And they want to keep their jobs. And so Russell Wilson is going to present the best option for them if they don't land Aaron Rodgers. And so if I am Russell Wilson at this point, why would I not wait until after the draft to decide where I go? Because he doesn't want to have a rookie quarterback breathing down his neck. And there's limited shares in this thing. But whichever team doesn't sign Aaron Rodgers or draft a quarterback, I guess the doomsday scenario, if I was Russell Wilson, would be the Giants sign Rodgers, the Browns draft Sanders at 2, and the Steelers still don't want you back. I think then it becomes very, very contentious if you're Russell Wilson. At that point, maybe you're waiting for a job to open up to injury or something like that. But I think he's going to have leverage after the draft, kind of decide where he wants to go, and to pick the place that's going to have the clearer spot for him to start next year. I think personally, if I were him, I would go to whichever one didn't draft a rookie.
Makes sense to me, but that one scenario you painted where nobody wants them, or that would be a cold, hard thing to accept for him. That would be a wow. How far he had fallen if the Steelers don't offer him and he doesn't go anywhere else, and then he's, like you said, waiting for an injury vacancy to open up. Well, whatever happens with Wilson, this can be stated as a fact, and it comes courtesy of Mark Cabale on Twitter, because obviously Justin Fields was the Week 1 starter in Pittsburgh. So the Steelers will have a starting Week 1 quarterback a new one for the 5th consecutive year, which puts them in the league with the Falcons. You know what I mean? In terms of just the rotating guys at quarterback. If that isn't the definition, of QB purgatory, I don't know what is. And many are saying this is another reset year to get ready for 2026, when many believe that the Steelers will do the draft. And no wonder Cam Hayward is really hearing the tick-tock of Father Time and was on the Rich Eisen show and said this: I think we are in a state of urgency. We have a lot of guys like myself that are in the latter stages of their career, and we all want to win. And it's not just enough to win a playoff game, which they haven't done that either in 7 seasons. So what do you make of this rising and more vocal level of urgency, especially from the veterans on defense, looking at this another year of like a quarterback reset, in terms of this rotating week 1 starter scenario?
Well, we talked about this a little bit during free agency, where it kind of feels like the window for where the defense is going to fall off to where the offense is finally going to be ready. They don't really line up, do they? Even if this rookie quarterback is dynamite, is straight up dynamite in his rookie year, if he is Jaden Daniels 2.0, you still didn't get to the Super Bowl. No rookie quarterback's ever gotten to the Super Bowl. Daniels kind of broke precedent to where he got, right? I mean, what he did was incredible as a rookie. We have seen great rookies come along. CJ Stroud, he won a playoff game. But again, as a rookie quarterback, to get to a Super Bowl is unheard of. It just doesn't happen. And so 2027 would be the realistic first year if this quarterback is that dynamite of spark. He's that bona fide franchise quarterback, is that future top 10 guy. By 2027, Cam Hayward's contract will be over. TJ Watt will be 33 years old. Minka Fitzpatrick will be older than the age of 30. I mean, we are talking about the defense aging out. Now, there are some players on that defense that could be there. Alex Highsmith, Nick Herbig, Patrick Queen, Joey Porter Jr., these guys that could still be around there and still be very good players. But the star edge rusher that you have, the star interior defensive lineman, and the star safety all might be out or out of their primes by that time. And so it matters. That's why winning now for the Steelers is their motto. But that's also why you can make just as good an argument that those guys should be trade chips. Like, that is why when you hear people say trade TJ Watt, it's not just some loon idea. Now, are they going to do that? They're not going to do that. Should they do that? I think it's debatable. I think before this time, it would have been a crazy idea, right? Just why would you do that? And tanking outright is the Steelers are never going to do it. And they probably shouldn't, because I will say this about, people saying just blow up the roster and just tank. Look at the history of teams that just outright gut their roster and tank. It doesn't end well generally. You need culture builders, you need stars, you need all of that. And so it doesn't always work. You should do it kind of how the Lions did it with their new regime, which is they kind of built it up, but they had veterans, guys like Taylor Decker in that locker room, guys like Darius Slay for the beginning stages of all of that. They were in the locker room and were able to kind of give that team some guidance, and they were talented players still. And so you still need that veteran presence. You still need those veterans, those talented players. You can't completely gut a roster. It generally doesn't end well for teams, or it takes 3 to 4 years to build it all up. And by then, your rookie quarterback is going to want to be paid $60 million a year, and it constricts your cap space. And so the reason why team building in the NFL is so time-oriented now is because of these windows. And so if you're the Steelers, you're just hoping TJ Watt continues to stay elite through these. You're hoping Cam Hayward continues to hold on. He's 36 years old, coming off a first-team All-Pro year, but every single year it possibly falls off. Minka Fitzpatrick, can he bounce back? There's a lot of things that are going to come into this, but it's an awkward lineup for the Steelers. They are kind of starting to get into motion on offense because they're going to have a star receiver. They're going to have a young offensive line coming up together. They're going to get their young running back. They have a future tight end and Pat Freiermuth under contract long term. But the quarterbacks piece isn't going to probably be solved until next year. And so, bringing Aaron Rodgers, bringing back Russell Wilson, doing any of that wouldn't have mattered if they had signed Sam Darnold, signed Justin Fields. None of that made them Super Bowl contenders. And I think that's what makes it kind of hard. Steelers are kind of in this middle roading period, and this is why you consistently get 10-7, 9-8. This is why you kind of continue to get these results, because the Steelers are just kind of in this odd peak in middle road. And so they're going to have to, I think, this needle that they're going to have to thread. They're either going to have to somehow thread this needle to where they can compete in the latter stages of these guys' careers, or they're going to have to, while getting this quarterback ready, also prepare the next generation of the defense. That's going to be their kind of key. I think they're at edge rusher. They're kind of set already. I mean, they don't have a TJ Watt level guy, but man, Highsmith and Herbig would be. I mean, those are both starters, or really plus starters in the NFL. So you at least set yourself up there. But this defensive lineman we think they're going to draft this year, going to be massive, right? Keanu Benton's progression going to be massive. Joey Porter Jr.'s progression, massive. Like, all these things are huge for their future defensively. Because if that quarterback comes in and has, new stars on defense, if Joey Porter Jr. blossoms into a star corner, if this defensive lineman they probably pick early, and then Keanu Benton are long-term pieces up front, you still have Herbig and Highsmith, and Watt's still there playing well. You can hit the ground running immediately with that quarterback if you hit. But it's a tough needle to thread. Team building in the NFL, man, is tough because the core's window. I say this, you think you have a young core, and then 4 or 5 years later, that core is already flamed out. It is not, NFL stands for not for long, because the cores do not stand long in the NFL. You will see that time and time again where these things flame out.
Jerry Glanville's immortal words. That guy was awesome. He was the not for long guy. He was a piece of work. He could come up with a good quote, and that will stand the test of time. And it, like you said, it just seems like it's getting shorter and shorter. I mean, the Steelers of the 70s had a decade of dominance, but like you said, 4 years in, and your core can be flaming out. I guess, not to belabor it, but I guess that sense of urgency is what makes Rodgers the most intriguing option, because, hey, maybe he does have something left in the tank. And I guess that, would fit the win now scenario. And like you said, Tomlin loves, the veteran superstar guys, so that, I guess it does make it for the most intriguing and certainly the most newsworthy story for the year. But again, since we're in this, I guess I read somewhere we're a month out from the draft. So just tell us what you're up to, in this lull period where things are kind of just hanging around. I know you're going to some pro days, you're going to some NFL meetings. What's on your agenda, and what kind of coverage should we expect as this lull continues?
Yeah, I mean, so tomorrow I will head out to Columbus. I will be at Ohio State's Pro Day. We obviously know there are a lot of prospects there for the Steelers. Emeka Egbuka, Will Howard, both the running backs, Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson, Tylee Williams, Denzel Burke, lots of Steelers potential targets out there. So I'll be out there. I'm expecting to see Mike Tomlin and Omar Khan in Columbus tomorrow. So we will see how that kind of goes. I won't be there, but our Penn State guys will obviously be there this Friday covering Penn State. A little less of a Steelers hunting ground this year, but possible they're there for a few guys. Then on Saturday, I will be flying down to West Palm Beach. The NFL owners meetings are down there this year. I'll be there from Saturday through Wednesday. We will hear from Mike Tomlin, Omar Khan, and Art Rooney, so you get the triple head there. And we will hear from them and kind of get their thoughts on the offseason. We'll see if they have a quarterback by then. If not, you get their thoughts on the quarterback situation or Aaron Rodgers, et cetera, et cetera. So that's going to be key before the draft. And then kind of, through there, that's when we hit the full push towards draft season, right? It's going to be very much the pre-draft visits coming to the South Side. We'll get those. We'll get all 30 of them. We already have about 10 of them reported so far. And then obviously, I think probably the Monday or Tuesday before the draft, we will get Mike Tomlin and Omar Khan briefing the press. And then it'll be the NFL draft. It'll be down at the South Side for 3 days there as the Steelers set up shop and get ready to draft. So they have 6 draft picks this year. We'll see what they end up doing. If they trade back, add more picks, et cetera, et cetera. But that could all kind of come together. And that will be kind of the last big thing of this, what I would consider season, before flipping a new page. And then rookie minicamp will be 2 weeks after that. So on to 2025 at that point.
All right, Nick. And certainly with all those travels coming up, we're going to have a lot to talk about in next Tuesday's episode. So even though it's kind of a lull period, there's going to be a lot of new news and observations from Nick and talking to all the power figures on the Steelers. So we're going to have a lot to talk about next week, guys. So be here. Until then, hey, we got to go get those playmakers for 2025. I feel the urgency, Cam. I feel the urgency.